to share a little bit about your background and the company that you work for?
So absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. I'm looking forward to sharing this, maybe not to watching myself afterwards, but so I joined Nussbaum in 2016. So I've been with them for over 4 years now, doing sales and leasing of office, retail, and light industrial properties.
Mm.
That's both on the landlord and seller side of things, as well as a lot on the tenant and buyer side of things. That includes site selection, market research, and then a lot of contract negotiation, the back and forth between the parties. Really, the interesting conversation just in the last 24 hours has been changes to Virginia ABC laws. I don't know whether they're temporary or permanent, but allowing increased outside dining. A shopping center actually in Fairfax announced yesterday, we're going to purchase tents and picnic tables and set up in the parking lot to allow our number of restaurant tenants some additional outdoor dining. I'm
Wow.
having a conversation right now with a gym fitness tenant to try and do the same thing. How can we cordon part of the parking lot off to give you some space to get operations back, even at a limited basis? So I do think you're going to find some people looking at creative solutions. You have government officials, you have landlords who are willing to entertain those options and figure out how they can make things work. And it's uncharted territory, so it's working it out kind of so it works for everybody. Um, I think people are definitely going to be looking at these, but it definitely goes back to, are your staff comfortable coming back? Are you comfortable having people back? And ultimately, are the customers going to return even in these outdoors? And if they do return, do they return in the numbers necessary for some of these businesses to make a profit above their fixed costs? Of
Yeah.
course, some variable costs are lowered, but you still have a formula to crunch to see, does it make sense at 50% capacity, 75% capacity? What does that look like?
Yeah.
So we're really excited about, I think people are seeing the light at the end of the tunnel. And you're going to start hearing more of these conversations. It's going to be interesting to see who are the early adopters and who wait on the sideline and when they jump in. So I think that's what we're going to start seeing, honestly, this week. It'll be interesting.
Okay. That's that's cool the way that you broke down, because you were talking about the formula of the 50% capacity and all that, but you almost gave us a formula of staff confidence plus buyer confidence equals what decision you need to make. And I think almost everybody, regardless of the industry you're in, has that same challenge. How do I protect the folks who work for me and help them understand that this is a space where I am going to put their safety first? Because we've seen on the national scene what happens when you don't do that. And then how do I reassure my customers, whether it is something as simple as, I've even thought about when we're cleaning, should we be taking pictures so that the owners have something to show their staff, hey, we highlighted on our social media, this has been thoroughly cleaned. But we're all in completely uncharted territory. It's an interesting place to be. It's an interesting place to be. In terms of my last question is more so a tactical kind of boots on the ground question of folks are having a lot of conversation, business owners, about what to do once they get to a place where their income is diminished and they need to maintain their obligations to the landlord of their commercial space. Are there any thoughts that you have about that? Any creative ideas, or just simple conversation and being as early and upfront as possible once that becomes an issue?
Absolutely. I'm working on a lot of these conversations on the tenant side of things, representing tenants, and just as many where I'm representing the landlord. So we certainly understand both sides of things. I am pleased to say that I think for the most part, landlords have been very flexible in working with their tenants. It does go back to, as we said, a lot of what we're doing right now is just kicking the can down the road 30, 60, 90 days.
Mhm.
Um, what landlords are most willing to do is deferment rather than abatement, which means that that money that you don't pay over a certain amount of months, 2 or 3 months, is somehow divided over the remainder of the term. If you don't have a lot of remainder of term left, they're willing to extend the lease. And a lot of times they're willing to hold those rental rates steady over that extension to help that number kind of even out a little bit more. Uh, it's interesting that I definitely have seen a handful of tenants who have some extra negotiating power now. The lease is coming up. They certainly need some help. What landlords are looking for is sort of long-term commitments. So you certainly have, if you're looking at a renewal or an extension, you do have some conversation there. And you really, the landlords are not all that confident with being able to backfill a lot of these tenants. So that's another reason why they're willing to work with existing tenants, as long as everybody's in it kind of for the long haul. What I would strongly recommend to these tenants is speaking with an agent so they have someone on their side. You know, I don't think it hurts to have a conversation directly with the landlord, with the property management, kind of get their thoughts on what they're thinking. But if the conversation becomes more of a negotiation and less of a conversation, absolutely have some tenant representation on your side of the table for these conversations.
Nice, nice. So, folks who are in that renewal phase and thinking about, do I renew? Do I renew here? Have more to leverage. And folks who are in the midst of it, maybe they just signed up or they're in the middle of their term, just need to communicate as effectively and early as possible with landlords.
Absolutely. Do not wait until the 15th of May to have a conversation about what you're doing with May rent. People prefer that upfront conversation, and vice versa. If you're a landlord and have tenants, have these conversations early. Be willing to work. It goes a long way. You know, we talked a lot about, you said about, are people looking, are you doing your part cleaning? Am I going to come back to you? Consumer confidence of businesses. We see the same with landlords. Tenants will absolutely remember which landlords were willing to work with them and which landlords were not. And that's from the small tenants all the way up to the large nationals.
That's good to know.
Absolutely. So it's definitely been if there's any bright side, we have seen a lot of collaboration, a lot of compromise between these landlords and tenants. Everybody's sort of on even footing. It's new uncharted territory for everybody. So it's been a little refreshing to see less of that adversarial nature of that relationship and more of the partnership that it should be.
Wow, and that's saying a lot coming from someone who makes it their business to negotiate between these two groups. So,
My job is to facilitate a deal, and if it doesn't work for one party, it's not going to work. So we are big on win-win situations whenever possible.
great. Well, I appreciate your time and your thoughts. I can only imagine that next week it'll be a different conversation, and 30 days from now it'll be whole new topics. But it's really exciting to see how people are being innovative and what the reactions are of different industries during this time. I think we'll look back on this time and say, if we could make it through this, we could make it through anything.
That's exactly right. I think there will definitely be some people who emerge stronger. There certainly will be some casualties. I don't think anybody has any misgivings about that. I'll end on some positive optimism.
Okay.
Uh, New numbers are showing that 70% of consumers will make purchases that they had planned on making previously, but that they were not able to make. So there is going to be some good pent up demand once the flags are raised and the light turns green. The other part is that 65% of consumers say that they do not plan on cutting any spending, or that they only plan on cutting spending for 5 months or less. So you still have consumer confidence. You still have people who are waiting on the sidelines to spend this money. And we're really seeing things recovering very quickly once we get through this. So I'm hoping as people start going out and these restrictions start lifting, that we're smart, so we can continue doing it slowly and we're not having to backtrack at any point. But I think people are certainly seeing the light at the end of the tunnel, and we're excited about what things look like over the next couple of weeks.
Wonderful.